Don't drink tonight. That whisper saved my life. At the dinner table, Olivia's eyes clung to my wine glass, and Ryan's fingers drummed impatiently against the wood. Lamb chops, candlelight, silver shining. It all looked perfect, but the air was poisoned. I froze with the glass at my lips because in that instant I knew my daughter wasn't feeding me dinner. She was feeding me death. When she poured my wine, I noticed the tiniest click, as if a jar had been shoved hastily into the cabinet. Sharon's eyes flicked toward mine. She had heard it too. I pushed my plate away. Ryan smirked. "What's wrong, Katherine? Don't trust us anymore?" His tone was mocking. I forced a smile. "Just not hungry tonight." Inside, my chest pounded. Something was wrong. Later, as I washed dishes, I saw Olivia slide her phone under a napkin when I entered the room. A message lit up before the screen dimmed. "She'll be gone soon. Debt cleared." My knees nearly buckled. I didn't confront her then. Instead, I carried that image, my daughter conspiring with her husband, like a stone pressed into my chest. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you have confronted your child right there, demanded the truth? Or would you have waited, watched, and gathered proof? As I did, that night I lay awake, memories pouring through me like salt into an open wound. I remembered selling my jewelry to pay for Olivia's tuition, working weekends while she danced at recitals, giving up vacations so she could have piano lessons, ballet, a wedding worthy of her dreams. Every sacrifice had been made with love. And now, this was how she repaid me? By plotting my disappearance over dinner? My eyes stung, but beneath the hurt was a strange current of strength. If she thought I would be erased quietly, she would learn what it meant to underestimate me. The next morning, Sharon arrived with a basket of muffins. She studied my face and finally whispered, "Katherine, something's off with Olivia. Last night, when you went to get more water, I saw her stir your wine again." Her words sliced through me. My suspicion was no longer paranoia, it was fact. I decided in that instant I wouldn't be their victim, but I wouldn't accuse them empty-handed either. I needed proof, and I would get it. That very afternoon, Ryan appeared at my doorstep unannounced. He leaned against the doorway, smiling too wide. "We should talk about your will," he said casually, as though asking about the weather. My hand froze on the doorknob. My blood turned cold. What he didn't know was that Sharon stood in the kitchen behind me, phone in hand, quietly recording every word. Before I take you deeper into this story of betrayal and survival, don't forget to subscribe to Tangled Heart Stories and turn on the notification bell. Here, you'll always find tales of sacrifice, betrayal, and unexpected twists. Tell me, where are you watching from? Leave a comment below. Maybe the next story will echo your own experience. Ryan's words about my will clung to me like smoke long after he left the doorway. He had spoken with that casual arrogance, as though my life's work, my home, my savings were nothing but scraps already half digested in his greedy mouth. Sharon replayed the recording on her phone, and the sound of his voice, smooth, confident, shameless, made my stomach twist. I wanted to storm across town, confront Olivia, demand to know how she could let her husband treat me as if I were already in the grave. But the wiser part of me held back. I had lived long enough to know anger was quick, evidence was slow, and justice only came to those who gathered it carefully. The next few weeks turned into a theater of hypocrisy. Olivia and Ryan visited often, bringing flowers, casseroles, little gestures meant to appear affectionate. "Mom, you need more rest," Olivia would say. touching my arm with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Don't worry about finances. Ryan and I will take care of everything." But behind the sweetness was pressure, subtle but relentless. Ryan's eyes darted toward the envelopes on my desk, toward the safe tucked behind the bookshelf. He would offer to help organize my papers or ask probing questions about bank accounts. Each time I found an excuse, buying myself more time. Then one afternoon, the mask slipped. Olivia sat across from me at the dining table, her tone light but her words sharp. "Mom, if you could just help us with $200,000, everything would be fine. Ryan could clear his debts and we could start fresh. Think of it as an investment in your daughter's future." She said it like she was asking for a recipe, as if $200,000 were nothing more than a cup of sugar. I set down my teacup and looked her in the eye. My voice came out quiet but firm. "No, Olivia, I will not give you that money." She blinked, startled by the finality in my tone. Ryan leaned forward, his jaw tight. "You're being unreasonable, Katherine. You can't take it with you when you die." The cruelty of his words sliced through me, but I didn't waver. "Then it will stay with me until I choose where it belongs," I said evenly, "and it will not be handed over to gamblers and liars." The silence that followed was heavy, thick with rage they didn't bother to hide. Olivia forced a smile, her knuckles white as she gripped her glass. "We're only trying to help, Mom. You'll see that soon." But her eyes gave her away. There was no love there, only hunger. One afternoon, I hired Robert, a trusted accountant who had managed my company years ago, to quietly check my finances. His findings chilled me. Withdrawals had been attempted with forged signatures. Someone, likely Olivia, had tried to access funds meant for my retirement. Robert's voice trembled with both pity and anger when he showed me the documents. "Katherine, you need to be careful. This isn't just recklessness, it's deliberate." I stared at the paper, my daughter's name scribbled in shaky imitation of my hand, and something in me hardened. Still, I didn't show my anger. I played the role of the frail mother, thanking Olivia for her concern, smiling when she brought groceries, nodding when Ryan bragged about his new business ventures. At night, however, I lay awake with my heart pounding. I thought of every cutting remark Olivia had slipped into conversations over the years, words I had brushed aside as stress or frustration. "You're too old to understand. You should just relax and let us handle things. You're not useful anymore." Each phrase had been a crack, and now the foundation was crumbling. One evening, Sharon convinced me to follow Ryan discreetly. She called a friend with a taxi, and we trailed him across town. I watched from the back seat as he entered a dimly lit building with flashing neon. A casino. My pulse raced. So this was the business venture. Gambling debts stacked high enough to drive a man to murder. He stayed inside for hours, and when he emerged, his face was tight, his steps quick, as if running from shadows. Sharon touched my hand gently. "He's drowning in debt, Katherine. That's why they need your money. That's why they asked for the $200,000. Her voice was heavy with pity, but I could feel only fury. The performance at home grew more elaborate. Olivia began cooking my favorite meals more often, arranging flowers in the living room, even suggesting family outings. But the cracks showed. Once, I caught her quickly deleting a message on her phone when I entered the room. Another time, she whispered harshly to Ryan in the hallway, "If she doesn't sign soon, we're ruined." They didn't know I was listening, standing in the dark with my hand pressed against the wall to steady myself. I wondered, late at night, how love could sour so completely. I had poured everything into Olivia. Was it my fault? Did I give too much, making her believe I was inexhaustible? Or had greed always been there, coiled like a snake, waiting for the right moment? The questions gnawed at me, but I knew one truth clearly. If I didn't act, I would not survive this storm. The turning point arrived quietly, like a whisper in the dark. Olivia came to visit, her arms full of groceries, her voice overly bright. As she placed apples into a bowl, I asked softly, "Olivia, do you ever worry about the future? About what happens when I'm gone?" She froze for the briefest second before replying, "Of course, Mom. But don't worry. We'll take care of everything." Her tone was smooth, rehearsed. But I noticed her glance flicker toward my safe. That glance told me more than her words ever could. After she left, Sharon sat with me at the kitchen table. I told her everything: the casino, the forged signatures, the whispered threats, the $200,000 demand. She listened in silence, her eyes growing darker with each revelation. Then she leaned forward and said, "Katherine, you can't let this slide. We need to collect proof, enough to expose them fully. You deserve more than survival. You deserve justice." Her words planted a seed that grew into resolve. From that moment, my role changed. I was no longer the hunted mother, waiting for the next betrayal. I became the quiet observer, the recorder, the planner. Every time Olivia or Ryan visited, Sharon or I would find a way to capture their words: a slipped comment about debts, a careless phrase about inheritance, a bitter argument spilling into threats. Piece by piece, their plan became clearer, and I held each piece like a weapon I would someday use. Yet the hardest part was emotional. Each recording, each proof, was also a blade cutting into my heart. This was my child, my own flesh and blood, speaking of me as an obstacle, a burden, a bank account. At night, I wept silently, pressing my face into the pillow so Sharon wouldn't hear through the walls. Grief and betrayal, mixed with determination. A storm that both broke and fueled me. The tension built towards something inevitable. One evening, Ryan arrived again, his smile thin, his eyes restless. He leaned closer than necessary, his voice low. "Katherine, you really should consider signing over the house now. It'll save trouble later." I stared into his face, memorizing every line, every false charm. I wanted to spit the truth into his smug smile, but I bit my tongue. Because behind the curtain of my silence, Sharon's phone was recording once more. When he left, I stood at the window, watching his car disappear into the night. My hands trembled, but not from fear, from anticipation. The stage was set, the players had revealed their roles, and soon the curtain would rise on a reckoning they never expected. The night of my decision came with rain tapping gently on the windows, the kind of steady rhythm that makes the world feel hushed, as if holding its breath. Sharon and I sat at the kitchen table, the light between us dim and golden, our mugs of tea growing cold. She leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "Katherine, you have enough pieces now, but you need one thing that seals it, something that cannot be twisted, cannot be denied." Her words echoed inside me. She was right. I had fragments, recordings, signatures, whispers, but I needed the heart of the storm. That opportunity arrived faster than I imagined. A few days later, Olivia visited alone. Her hair was perfectly arranged, her perfume expensive, but her eyes carried a flicker of desperation. She sat across from me, smoothing her skirt, and began with honeyed words. "Mom, I know things have been tense, but Ryan and I only want the best for you. Wouldn't it be easier if everything was handled now while you're still here to make decisions?" She paused, then smiled as though we were simply chatting about weekend plans. The house, the accounts, it would all be safe with us. I let silence stretch between us, forcing her to fill it. Her smile faltered. She reached for my hand. Please, Mom. We're family. You don't want to leave things messy when... She didn't finish the sentence, but her meaning was sharp enough to cut. I withdrew my hand slowly, as though her touch burned. Olivia, I said softly, tell me the truth. Why the sudden urgency? Her eyes flicked away, just for a moment, and in that moment her mask cracked. Because Ryan's debts are suffocating us, she blurted, then bit her lip. The words hung heavy in the air. I felt my breath catch, but I forced calmness into my voice. So you thought erasing me would solve that? Her head snapped up, shock widening her eyes. She began to stammer. No, Mom, it's not like that. We just... But in her rush, she slipped again, muttering a detail about powder ground fine enough not to be noticed in the stew. My stomach turned to ice. She had admitted more than she realized. And then came the final crack. In her panic, she said words that seared into me. If you had just given us the $200,000, we wouldn't have had to think this way. Beneath the table, my phone recorded every word. After she left, I sat frozen in my chair, the recording still running in my palm. Sharon entered quietly, saw my face, and knew. We listened together, the sound of Olivia's voice trembling through the kitchen. When it ended, Sharon placed her hand over mine. This is it. This is the proof. The next days blurred into a mixture of dread and determination. I met privately with Mr. Harrison, a lawyer I had trusted years ago during the sale of my company. He was older now, his hair silver, but his mind was razor sharp. I played him the recordings, showed him the forged documents, laid bare the pieces of my daughter's betrayal. He listened without interruption, his face unreadable. When it ended, he leaned back slowly, exhaling. Katherine, what they've done is criminal. Attempted fraud, conspiracy, possibly worse. But we can't rush this. If we want the law to protect you, we need to present it airtight. His words steadied me. For the first time, I felt not just like a victim collecting shards of betrayal, but like a woman standing on the edge of justice. At night, however, the pain was relentless. I would sit in my bedroom, staring at old photographs. Olivia in her graduation gown, Olivia on her wedding day, Olivia laughing with her arms around me. I whispered to the still air, "Where did I lose you? At what moment did love turn to hunger?" Tears blurred the images, but my resolve did not waver. If love could not save her, perhaps consequence could. One evening, the storm of truth finally struck. Ryan barged into my home without knocking, his face pale, sweat on his brow. He spoke quickly, words tumbling over each other. "Katherine, we need you to sign tonight. The creditors, they're coming for us. If you don't..." His hands clenched into fists, his voice breaking into a growl. "You'll regret it." I stood still, my heart pounding. Behind me, Sharon quietly stepped from the shadows, her phone lifted. His threats, clear and unfiltered, filled the room. I stared at him, and for the first time, I didn't feel fear. I felt clarity. "This house," I said steadily, "is mine. And you're trespassing." His mouth opened, but no words came. Sharon's recording light glowed red, capturing his silence, his fury, his downfall. When he stormed out, slamming the door, Sharon and I looked at each other. The moment had come. The net was closing, and they didn't even know it. Yet even then, the mother in me grieved. I climbed into bed that night, pulling the quilt to my chin, and whispered a prayer into the dark. Not for protection, not for strength. I had those already. I prayed for Olivia's soul, for the daughter I had once known, the little girl who used to tuck notes into my purse before school trips. Somewhere along the way, she had vanished, and in her place stood a woman willing to poison her own mother. I drifted into uneasy sleep, the storm still raging inside me, but beneath it all, a new flame had been lit. The time for silence was over. The time for confrontation had begun. The day of reckoning arrived with a chill that cut through the air. Mr. Harrison had arranged everything: documents, recordings, statements, layered neatly in a folder that seemed heavier than stone. He looked at me across his desk, his expression solemn. "Katherine, once we move forward, there's no turning back. This will destroy whatever bond remains." I nodded slowly. The bond had already been severed by greed. What remained was only the echo of motherhood, and even echoes fade. When the confrontation came, it happened not in court, but in my living room. Olivia and Ryan arrived together, pretending concern, carrying a casserole dish as though the smell of baked pasta could disguise the stench of their desperation. I invited them in, my face calm, my voice steady. Sharon sat quietly in the corner, a silent witness. The folder lay on the coffee table like an unspoken threat. Ryan began first, pacing. His words rushed. "Katherine, we can't wait any longer. You need to sign. The house, the accounts, transfer them now." Olivia placed her hand on his arm, trying to soften the demand. "Mom, please, it's for everyone's good. You don't want conflict when—" Again she left the sentence dangling, like a noose swaying in the air. I leaned back in my chair, folding my hands. "Before I decide anything, I need to hear the truth. From both of you." Ryan scoffed. "The truth? The truth is, you're old, you're stubborn, and you're standing in the way of your family's future." His cruelty was sharp, deliberate. I felt it pierce, but I did not flinch. Olivia's face tightened, fear flashing for just a moment. With deliberate calm, I opened the folder and slid the first paper across the table. "This," I said softly, "is a record of a forged withdrawal attempt in my name. Robert confirmed it." Olivia's cheeks flushed, but she said nothing. I placed the next sheet down, copies of texts, the ones Sharon had captured on camera. Ryan's jaw clenched. Then I pressed the phone onto the table and played the recording. Olivia's voice, admitting to powder ground fine enough not to be noticed, and her desperate confession about the $200,000. The room seemed to shrink, the air thick with silence. Olivia's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide. Ryan cursed under his breath, his fists tightening. Sharon's presence in the corner was steady, her eyes never leaving them. I spoke again, my voice rising with strength I had not felt in years. "You plotted against me in my own home. You saw me not as a mother, but as an obstacle to be removed. And you thought I would never see through it." Ryan lunged toward the table, but Sharon stood abruptly, her phone raised, the red light blinking. "Take another step, Ryan, and this goes straight to the police tonight." He froze, his chest heaving. Olivia began to cry, or at least she tried to. The sound was high-pitched, brittle, without the weight of remorse. "Mom, I didn't mean it. Ryan pressured me. You know I'd never hurt you." But her words betrayed her. In the recording, she had spoken with detail only the guilty could know. I looked at her, truly looked, and for the first time I saw a stranger wearing my daughter's face. "No. Olivia," I whispered, "you meant every word. Love doesn't grind oleander into powder. Love doesn't demand $200,000 as ransom for loyalty." Her sobs cracked into silence. The days that followed unfolded like a courtroom drama written across real life. Mr. Harrison moved swiftly, presenting the evidence to authorities. Police gathered the recordings, the forged signatures, even the jar Sharon had retrieved discreetly from Olivia's kitchen cabinet, labeled ground oleander. The investigation widened. It wasn't only me they had plotted against. Ryan had debts tied to dangerous people, and Olivia had been complicit, drawing blueprints of a life without me, with my estate funding their survival. When the hearing began, the courtroom was filled with the heavy hush of anticipation. I sat beside Mr. Harrison, Sharon just behind me, her presence steadying me like an anchor. Olivia entered first, her face pale, her once proud posture broken. Ryan followed, eyes dark, his jaw clenched as if daring the world to challenge him. The prosecutor laid out the case with brutal clarity: conspiracy, attempted fraud, intent to harm. The recordings echoed through the chamber, Olivia's trembling voice admitting the plan, Ryan's threats dripping with menace. Gasps rippled through the room. Olivia's lawyer tried to twist the narrative, painting her as a victim of her husband's influence. But then the final piece was revealed, a notebook Sharon had found in a drawer, scribbled with lists, calculations, even a draft of a funeral speech Olivia had prepared in advance. The words were cold, rehearsed grief, ready to be performed once I was gone. The judge's face hardened. Olivia buried her face in her hands. Ryan stared at the floor, silent. And I, though my heart ached, felt a strange calm wash over me. The truth had spoken for itself, and it was louder than any plea. When the verdict was delivered, guilty on charges of fraud and conspiracy, Olivia looked at me, her eyes brimming with a rage that had no tears left. It was not remorse I saw, but fury at being caught, fury that her plan had failed. Ryan's expression was emptier, resigned, as though he had known all along this would be the ending. As they were led away, Olivia cried out, her voice sharp and raw. "You've lost me, Mom. You'll be alone forever." I rose slowly, my hand steady on the edge of the table, and answered with words I had carried for weeks. "I lost you long ago, Olivia, on the day you chose greed over love." Her face twisted. But the guards pulled her back, her voice swallowed by the closing doors. The silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with finality, with justice, with the sound of chains breaking free. I walked out of that courthouse into the crisp air, Sharon at my side, the weight of years lifting from my shoulders. In the days after the trial, my house felt different. The walls that had once carried whispers of betrayal now seemed to breathe again, as though relieved to be free of the poison that had seeped into them. I moved slowly through the rooms, touching familiar objects, remembering the life I had built here, every sacrifice, every moment of love that had once filled this space. The silence was no longer suffocating. It was healing. Sharon visited often, bringing fresh bread or sitting with me on the porch as the sun set. We didn't need many words. Her presence was a reminder that loyalty and kindness still existed, that blood was not the only tie that mattered. Sometimes, in the evenings, I would hear children playing on the street, their laughter drifting through the open windows. It reminded me of Olivia when she was young, when her joy had been pure and untainted by greed. My heart would ache, but the ache was softer now, a scar rather than an open wound. I began volunteering at a community center that supported women who had been deceived or abandoned by their families. At first, I wasn't sure I could bear to listen to stories that mirrored my own pain. But as I sat with them, sharing cups of tea and quiet confessions, I realized something profound. We were not alone. One woman told me her son had emptied her savings and left her in debt. Another whispered that her daughter had manipulated her into signing away her home. Each story was a reflection of my own, And in sharing them, we found solidarity. We were survivors, not victims. One afternoon, I brought a small box to the garden behind my house. Inside were fragments of the past, an old photograph of Olivia as a child, a charm bracelet she had once given me on Mother's Day, and the necklace she had gifted me years ago, the same one I had worn through all the lies and betrayals. I knelt by the rose bushes and dug into the soil with my bare hands, placing the box gently into the earth. As I covered it, tears slid down my cheeks, but they were not only tears of grief, they were tears of release. By burying those objects, I was laying to rest the version of my daughter I had lost, and with her, the weight I had carried. Life slowly began to take shape again. Mornings were spent tending the garden, afternoons at the center, evenings writing in a journal that had become both a record and a release. I wrote not just about the pain, but about the resilience it unearthed. I wrote about the danger of unchecked greed, about the strength hidden in silence, and about the healing power of truth. And yet, there were nights when memories crept in like shadows. I would dream of Olivia as a little girl, her laughter echoing through the house, her small hands tugging at my sleeve. In those moments, the loss struck with fresh force, but I learned to breathe through it, to remind myself that while I had lost a daughter to greed, I had gained something else: freedom, clarity, and the chance to live without fear. One day, as I left the center, a woman about my age touched my arm. Her eyes were weary, but kind. "You told your story today," she said softly. "And because you did, I think I finally have the courage to tell mine." Her words stayed with me all evening. I realized then that my suffering had not been in vain. By speaking, by refusing to hide, I had become a lantern for others stumbling in the dark. Seasons shifted. The trial became a memory, recounted in hushed voices, a cautionary tale whispered in the town. Olivia and Ryan faded into silence, their names no longer spoken in my home. Letters arrived from the prison, scrawled in Olivia's handwriting, but I left them unopened in a drawer. I had already heard all I needed to hear. One crisp autumn morning, I stood at the porch watching leaves drift to the ground, gold and crimson. Sharon joined me, wrapping a scarf around her neck. She looked at me with a small smile. "You seem lighter," she said. I nodded, because I finally understand something. Respect isn't given by blood. It's earned through love and kindness, and I will never confuse the two again. The sun rose higher, casting light across the yard, and I felt the warmth seep into me. I was no longer the woman who trembled at the edge of betrayal. I was Katherine, a survivor, a mother who had chosen truth over silence, a woman who had walked through fire and come out carrying her own torch. And as the wind carried the scent of roses from the garden, I whispered into the morning air, not to Olivia, not to Ryan, but to myself: I am free. If you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you have forgiven, or would you have drawn the line as I did? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know. And don't forget to subscribe to Tangled Heart Stories so you never miss the next tale of sacrifice, betrayal, and justice that waits just around the corner.